the previous parts, 1 through 6 or 1 through 5. If you're on Spotify, Apple, etc., go listen to those first. We're diving into the overall high-level creative strategy process, starting from onboarding a new client to pumping out winning ads and then testing them, iterating, etc. So where we are now, we are focusing on the actual creative has been tested in the ad account from brief number 1. And we want to understand what performance or what ads have the best performance and how we should go about deciding overall next steps. I know in our last episode, we were talking about setting up creative testing campaigns, and we started talking about a bit of the metrics we look at. One thing we said was all metrics matter, but very few matter on their own as standalones besides CAC or CPA that way. We talked through your methodology for discerning which creatives are performing based on certain metrics that way. One thing that we did not talk about, though, was how we go about setting up our creative test to quickly track. And what I mean by quickly track is ideally your naming conventions, the way that you set up your ad sets, your ads are done in a way so that your creative strategist can quickly go in and look at data and make sense of it versus having to spend a lot of time, energy, and effort diving into the ads and figuring out what is working. Let's talk about naming conventions, and then let's go into deciding next steps. Naming conventions is something we're really strong behind at BrighterClick. Give me your perspective on it. I'd love to hear that, and then I'll just kind of share some as well.
I think Meta has some serious work to do in terms of making this easier. Yeah. And I could be wrong here, but I've never even been able to find a way to actually filter for static images so that I can look at the average of a static image versus the average of a video. I think when you go into creative reporting, like there is a setting somewhere, but I recall it being really, really hard to find. And to be honest, I've not really ever put myself in a situation where I have to rely on Meta to be able to classify my creatives into different buckets, because I just make sure that my naming conventions are on point, reliable, and allow me to kind of get that information. In one of the prior episodes of however many we've done today, we talked about how we kind of use a point system to break down creative packages, how many images versus how many videos. And this is something that, every time you put a creative brief together, you should know really, really, easily be able to find really simply what format is performing best in the ad account so that you can go ahead and do more of that. That's not to say, right, videos perform the best, we're only doing videos, because again, like we've talked about it on a previous episode, but you must have creative diversity in your ad account, which includes format types. But if video outperforms static, then you might decide, hey, I'm going to do 75% of this brief allowance of video. But if you can't look at how videos perform versus images, how can you ever decide what to go in the next brief? And that is just the most basic component of deciphering ad performance. Like thinking about copy angles, motivators, creative themes, short copy, long copy. There are so many things that you can look at. And so, yeah, figuring out what's important to you and making sure the naming conventions can allow you to make easy and fast data decisions is so important. I don't know. I feel like I must have woken up in a bad mood today, but I kind of feel like saying, if you're not going to put naming conventions in your ads that allow you to understand what's performing, don't bother running ads, because how are you ever going to actually improve performance and make good creative?
I thought you were going to go the Gordon Ramsay route with a British accent and say F off if you're not going to. Where mine was going with it. But I agree 100%. And it's very common when thought leaders or when, even us on this podcast talk about analyzing ad performance to get into the nitty gritty of metrics and individual ads and soft metrics versus performance metrics. But to me, I almost look at it more so from the top down of process or from hierarchy, where, like you're saying, we want to understand what formats are performing the best and what formats could be resuscitated or need to be continued to double down on or moved away from. We want to understand what messaging angles, what motivators, what themes are performing best. I use the term creative theme. Let's call them templates for ease of communication with everybody listening. But us versus them, flat lay lifestyle combo, a carousel slider with a preview image at the top. We call it a BC slider. Like these design styles, which of those are performing the best in an account, and not just in that account, but in other accounts in the same vertical, in the same industry. And then how is each brief performing, right? If you can start to set up your naming conventions or have a creative tracking software, something like Data Ally, when it finally releases, that can track performance by these key indicators or by these key areas, you can start to move strategy in a positive direction aside from just focusing on individual creative. Because to me, I don't know about you, Charlie, but when it comes to making a brief and then waiting 3 to 4 weeks to then go and audit it, it can be very easy if you're in an agency because you have multiple clients, but even if you're in-house, to forget some of the things that you wanted to test and to forget some of the things that were top of mind when you had these great ideas. So having naming conventions to track by format, like we're saying, but also having an area to document what you're testing and set up your naming conventions so you can aggregate data by the individual tests that you're running
100%.
within a brief is very important.
Working with you guys and having the creative sheets, reporting sheets that you put together is such a game changer, because not only can you get the insights that you need really quickly, which as an agency obviously is great because that's convenience for us, but it also improves performance because, you know, you might be testing a press article versus a post-it note, and then you maybe got an us versus them, and then the month before that you had like a testimonial overlay. And if you don't have a way to look at those creative themes on a line by line level, if every month I had to go in and manually like look at it and try and figure it out and like write down what the testimonial overlay got versus this other one, which I could only do if I had good naming conventions anyway. But if I manually was doing that, it would take me so long and there would be so much room for error that it just wouldn't be conducive to having like brief on brief improvements in performance. Because just being able to look at the table, so if you haven't seen it, Colby has shared it before, maybe put it like in the show notes because it is such a game changer. Like the reporting system that Colby's built for Brighter Click, like just one of the things, which is amazing, is like the creative theme table. So there's all the creative themes in there. Like I said, post-it note, us versus them, benefits call out, flat lay, combo, whatever, say yes to GIF, all of those different things. So I can just look at that table and see which creative themes have performed really well. And that way I can either say, right, you know, us versus them, we've spent, because it will collect spend as well, we've spent $2,000 on that concept. We probably wouldn't spend that much before calling it, but let's say we spent $2,000 on that concept, not working. We've tried a few different iterations. Right, we're not going to try that theme again. Press article, done amazing. We've spent $5,000 there and it's still performing really well. Okay, let's do another iteration of the press article. So that decision making becomes fast and also effective, like so effective. You can, it's just crazy how much of a difference it makes to being able to, create, like you said, brief on brief improvements. I don't know how people are doing it without this level of data. Like it's guesswork. That's all it could be.
And it's important, you know, it seems like, the naming conventions take time, the setting up the test and specific parameters, if you're using supermetrics or whatever it may be, take time, but it's slowing down to speed up and you can move a lot faster when it matters, which is going in and auditing the data. You don't want to fatigue yourself by spending so much time trying to pull together data and find it. So then by the time you need to make comprehensive decisions on it, you're tired, you're fed up with the process, you're ready to move.
And the thing is, you have to make decisions on the data every single month. So if you don't have the naming conventions right, every single month, you're losing that time and you're losing that opportunity to be better at what you're doing. Whereas doing the naming conventions, it's a ball ache. It takes a bit of time, but you only do that once. For the agency, for every single client that ever comes through the door, you spend a week getting your naming conventions right, creating a system, whether that be on a spreadsheet, whether that be whatever, who cares? Like spend a week on it and you're going to save countless hours for every single client that comes through the door, and you're going to improve performance. It's such a significant rate that you're going to be kicking yourself that you didn't spend some time to fix it sooner.
And we say month because we do briefs on a monthly basis. I've heard of agencies doing them weekly. Like think about times 4 of the time spent to audit that way.
I would be willing to bet my left arm on the fact that agencies who are doing weekly turnarounds have their naming conventions to a T. There's no way they could be doing weekly iterations and like new briefs without naming conventions that bring that kind of efficiency that we've just mentioned.
Yeah, it would be, you'd be losing hair faster than me if you did that. Let's move into the decision-making process. We talked in the last episode about metrics, soft metrics, performance metrics. If you want to hear us talk about that, go back to the previous episode for this.
What number was that? What number was that episode, Colby?
5 or 6. I was hoping we've recorded 5 in the last 2 hours, so we're a bit fatigued here. But let's just talk about the overall decision-making process of how you go about deciding what to put into brief 2 that way. What do you generally look at?
So I think this comes back to having a really good understanding of the numbers. So we've talked about it in a few of the episodes actually, but again, I think that just highlights how important it is really understanding the numbers. So Colby, as you mentioned, maybe the only metric in isolation that you could ever really look at is CAC or CPA, because that's the only true measure of whether something's scalable or not. But if you're only ever looking at CPA for your creative performance, you're going to miss out on so many opportunities for learning. So if you run, I don't know, you put the first brief in, you had 10 creatives, 7 of them didn't meet CPA, but 3 of them did. And those 7 that didn't meet CPA, you go, right, never doing them again. Let's do more of the 3 that did hit CPA, and we're going to put another 7 new ideas in there. God, you would burn through ideas at such a rate that you're never going to kind of get there. But for the 7 that didn't hit the CPA, you should be extracting learnings from them as well. In fact, I would go as far as to say you should be extracting more learnings from what didn't work than what did work. You can learn more from the 7 failed creatives than you can from the 3 that met KPI.
And put yourself, would really depend on your CPA, like what your target or what your actual CPA is. But put yourself a 10, 20, 30% buffer in between the target and not meeting that expectation. Call those your medium performers and look at how you can iterate those, right? We talked in one of the previous episodes we recorded today about not just iterating top performers, but iterating the medium performers. And your success rate or your just mathematical percentage of likelihood of success, if you're doing that versus either top performers or all net new, is a lot better if you're going with your medium performers to try and improve them versus a brand new concept with a brand new set of variables that you're going to be testing.
Totally. And I would say as a minimum, what I would recommend media buyers and creative strategists look at for this is, my favorite way to position it is to think of the ad as a funnel. So, you know, when we think of an e-commerce funnel, we think, oh, they click the ad, then they view the product, then they add to cart, then they initiate checkout, then they buy. Okay, so apply that logic to an ad creative. What happens first? Impressions. Then what happens? Maybe they click the read more, or they engage with the ad in some way. Like, then what happens? Then they might, if it's a video, then you would like watch the first 3 seconds. Then what happens? If it's a video, then they're going to watch up to 3 plays. So then you can look at the hold rate. Then what happens? If it's good, they click. So you look at the CTR. So you look at the whole user experience of an ad as a funnel, is what I like to do. And then you fix the bottleneck. That's the easiest way I could describe it for iteration. So if it's a video, if your hook rate is poor, that's the first thing I fix, hook rate. My hook rate is good, but my hold rate is poor. Fix my hold rate. Let's do some snappier transitions. Let's get to the point a bit faster. My click-through rate is poor. Let's put an incentive in there. Let's make it a bit more compelling. How can we like maybe tap into the psychology a bit more, make it a no-brainer, make it a must-have? And it doesn't just end with the ad either. So yes, the landing page has so much to answer for in terms of conversion rate, but we've talked about this earlier as well. Like if you're doing a meme and then you're sending them to a website, which is a resume builder, even if the meme is related to, oh, you hate writing your resume, that person isn't primed to then want to build their resume because there's no like congruency there. So your conversion rate is going to be awful. And that's because the ad wasn't saying the right thing. You could have the best landing page ever for resume writing, but if your ad hasn't made the user know what to expect when they get there, that user isn't going to complete the action that you want. So yeah, the ad funnel, if you like, the ad creative funnel, the way I like to think of it, doesn't just end when you get the click. Like I would also be looking at add to cart if it's ecom, or, you know, complete order form if it's lead gen. And then I would look at conversion rate and see overall what patterns can I learn. And if it's ecom, I would also look at average order value, because certain messages will change the average order value. If you talk about quality as one of your main motivators, you're much likely to see a higher average order value than if you're talking about, I mean, financial savings is the obvious one, but if you've got a discount, AOV would be lower. But let's say status, like look good in this tie, might get a lower average order value than these ties are handcrafted, made from silk. Then you're subliminally priming the user to spend more because you're creating value by using quality. So average order value should also be something that I would look at for ecom. So those, I would say, are the metrics. Think of it as a funnel. What can you learn? What are the individual stages? What can you learn at each one? And where is the bottleneck? Where is the fix that you need to do? And that will tell you what iterations you need to do.
I love that. And, I think that the thing you're mentioning about some creatives can actually lift AOV or lift purchase value, I think starts to move creative strategists into the next tier of performance. We very often talk about improving metrics, and we very often talk about getting sales or reducing CAC. But I think having that two-way door of also looking at how the work being done by creative strategy can also impact user behaviors to increase the amount that they purchase is very impactful for a brand as well.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, the obvious one that people think about is, let's do bundles in the creatives. Yeah. Again, super strategic, really great move, not dissing that whatsoever, but that's a surface level. Like, go deeper, be more curious, ask more questions. The more data you look at and identify or even search for trends, the more trends you're going to find and the more learnings you're going to find. Like, get curious, dig into everything. What I love to do is like pick a metric and say, like, right, CTR, what were my top 5 performing CTR ads, and literally get them in a line and look at them and say, right, what's the commonalities here? What do I think? What can I learn from this about what brings a good CTR? Do the same thing for conversion rate. Just look at conversion rate on its own. Pick the top 5 conversion rate ads, put them in a line, take screen grabs, whatever, use motion, put them in a line and say, right, what's happening here? Is it the same kind of motivator? Is it the same kind of visual? Maybe it's like us versus them because you're in a particularly crowded niche where you have an awesome USP. Like, you will learn. The more you dig, the more you will learn. There's no two ways about it. You just have to know where to look and just keep digging. You will find so much gold.
And it's too easy to just say, client, let's try a bundle app. I see people talk about this bundle app. Let's just try this. And then, okay, but what are we going to bundle? And what's the entry product and all those things, right? And I think ending on a controversial note, or it might be a controversial note, let's continue that idea of something is just too easy. You have a thought on creative fatigue. And
yes,
saying that creative fatigue is just an easy cop-out for a more serious problem.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is today. Like, I've said this in a few of the episodes. I feel like today I just woke up and chose violence, but I'm going for it. I'm sticking with it. Creative fatigue is very, very likely that you are not suffering from creative fatigue in your ad accounts. If you are a media buyer that says, it's creative fatigue, I call BS. Because chances are, unless you're a really super geo-targeted brand, so maybe you're doing lead gen and your audience size is like 200,000, yes, you probably will reach creative fatigue at some point because the total addressable market, the TAM, is really small. But if you're an ecom brand or even a lead gen with a bigger field of reach, your audience size is likely millions. So the proof is in the frequency. Look at your frequency. Is your frequency above 3 on your top of funnel campaigns? I am willing to bet that it's not. And if it isn't, then it's not creative fatigue that is the issue. Because if your frequency is 1, your audiences aren't seeing your ads so many times that they're not responding to them anymore. Like, the problem is your creative sucks because the algorithm will put your creative in front of low-hanging fruit. The algorithm will put your creative in front of who it thinks will convert. And if the ad creative isn't compelling enough, when the algorithm has to extend the reach, when you're scaling an ad and you're putting more and more spend behind it, and the algorithm has to extend the reach further out, if that ad creative isn't good enough to resonate and compel someone to drive action, that creative will stop performing. That's not creative fatigue. That is your ad just sucks.
You heard it here first. It's not fatigue, it's that Facebook's getting tired of running your bad ads.
So it's not that your audience got tired of seeing them, it's that Facebook got tired of running them. I love that.
And it's going to raise your price to put them out there because they're just not good.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, especially with ASC, yes, we can exclude existing customers from, you know, the setup, but it will still go to your retargeting audiences, right? It's going to go to your add to carters. It's going to go to your website visitors, very likely. And even non-ASC, any top of funnel campaign, Meta will always go to the low hanging fruit first. So if you've got a creative that's average, people that are already kind of bought into you, they could still convert on that. But when Meta is forced to expand that reach outside of that group and that ad creative stops performing, it's because the creative isn't compelling enough.
There's ads that I see every year around the same season. One's the Tootsie Pop. How many licks does it take to get to the center? It's an owl on the tree. It's a little boy. It looks like it was animated in 1954. It runs every year. They've had to have been running that ad for at least 20, 30 years at this point. That's weird to say. I just turned 30 2 days ago. Okay, so
how did I not know that? Wow, happy birthday.
That we have recorded 5, 6, 15 episodes today, something. We've gone through a lot today. We've covered a lot. There will be more episodes in the future. We have a lot cooking, a lot planning that we're working on. Excited to do those. But if you have not listened to all of this series, definitely go check that out before you continue forward with your day.
And also, please reach out if there are any topics that you really want Colby or I to kind of delve into. You know, I think I have loved these series. I think it's so cool. There's so many things that we can tap into. Maybe there's stuff that you've heard us say, briefly cover, but you want us to go into in a bit more depth. Just reach out and let us know, because yeah, we're here for you guys and we get too much joy out of this to stop filming.
We would love that. Awesome. Well, that's a wrap, Charlie. Appreciate it.